Today we're digging into some murders, missing persons cases, and unsolved crimes, and the common thread between them is that they all come from you guys, the viewers. I receive a good amount of messages from y'all asking me to look into stories that matter to you, and it's always crazy just how many messed up cases are out there. It's essentially never ending. But thank you for all the suggestions and hope we do them justice today. Here are the darkest cases from you, the viewers. Number 5. The night the world looked away. On September 11, 2001, basically every law enforcement resource in the state of New York was pointed toward Lower Manhattan. Every available trooper, canine unit, and aviation asset, they were all redirected south as the world was watching the towers fall. And in rural Tioga County in upstate New York, somebody knew that, and they decided to use it to their advantage.
Not sure to this day exactly what happened, but I think something happened. I can't tell you what it is.
Michelle Harris was a 35-year-old mother of 4 back then. She'd grown up in Spencer, a small town tucked between Binghamton and Elmira, and she'd been working part-time as a waitress at Lefty's restaurant to supplement the payments her estranged husband Cal was court-ordered to make. And their marriage had been unraveling for about 2 years at that point, and it was bitter. As the divorce loomed, well, things were getting increasingly hostile. That's mainly because Cal Harris was pretty wealthy. His family owned car dealerships across the area, and his net worth had sat around $5.4 million. Michelle was pushing for a full accounting of his assets, which would likely have cost him a lot of cash. On the evening of September 11th, Michelle finished her shift at Lefty's. She stayed to hang in the parking lot to have a drink with a coworker. And after that, she drove to her boyfriend's apartment where they talked, had a drink, and discussed how the attacks had given her some perspective on her own problems. And she left there around 11 to 11:30 p.m. feeling lighter than she had in months. And she had just decided to accept Cal's settlement offer and couldn't believe how free she felt. She had an appointment with her divorce lawyer early the next day, but nobody ever saw her again. The next morning, the family's nanny, Barb, received a call from Cal at 7 a.m. saying Michelle hadn't come home. Barb drove over immediately and spotted Michelle's gold Ford Windstar minivan parked on the road right at the end of the driveway. Doors were unlocked, keys still in the ignition. As she went inside and told Cal, and he walked out with her to take a look at the car, glanced at everything inside it, and then suggested Michelle had probably hitchhiked to New York City. She'd mentioned wanting to go that weekend to sell some jewelry. Well, Barb raised the possibility that Michelle might be nearby, maybe injured or disoriented. But Cal, he dismissed it, and then just went to work. When she didn't show up and couldn't be reached, Michelle's lawyer called the police, who went to the house to investigate, but it was a skeleton crew because a lot of them were down in NYC helping out. It would take 3 days before investigators noticed what appeared to be blood spatter on the garage wall. There was more that was found in the doorway, and then the hallway, and then the kitchen, but it had been mostly scrubbed clean, though not enough. And testing confirmed it was human blood, that it belonged to Michelle or at the very least a family member of hers. And so now that hitchhiking story Cal talked about didn't really sound so believable, let alone the fact that 9/11 was happening. On top of that, an employee at Cal's dealership went on to testify that Cal had asked him to wash his truck inside and out the morning of September 12th. Eventually, Cal was tried for the murder of Michelle, but without a body, it wasn't exactly an open and shut case. And there were 4 trials in total over the next 11 years. Cal was convicted twice, but both convictions overturned on appeal. The 3rd trial ended in a hung jury. In the 4th, a bench trial decided by a judge alone, Cal was acquitted in 2016 and he had finally cleared his name, at least legally. And to this day, Michelle has never been found and no one has ever been charged with her disappearance. And Cal continues to maintain his innocence and is currently suing the state police and the Tioga County District Attorney's Office for malicious prosecution. His 4 children, who were under 8 years old when their mother vanished, stand by their father. Michelle's family stands just as firmly on the other side.
Justice has been served.
We got justice. I won't bring her back, but we got justice.
Number 4. The officer in the canal. In the 1980s, Union Avenue in Bakersfield, California was a bit of a seedy stretch of road. It was where women worked the streets at night, shady dealings went down, and it was the regular patrol beat for Kern County Sheriff's Deputy David Keith Rogers. Now, David was a Navy vet, a father, a husband 3 times over, and to his co-workers, he was just regular Dave. And so on paper, he looked the part of a typical man who carries a badge. In 1983, though, when Rogers was 35 years old, he got straight up fired. Not for anything involving violence per se, but it was certainly something that should have ended his career for good. While on duty, he had detained a street-walking woman and forced her to undress so he could photograph her in a cemetery, which on many different levels is pretty messed up. She reported him, of course, and he was dismissed from the department. But after an appeal, his punishment was reduced to just a 15-day suspension, and he was reinstated after that. Now, there's an interesting note in the record about that woman, the one who complained about Rogers, and she never showed up for the appeal hearing, and in fact, has not been seen since. So from there, Rogers returned to duty, but instead of learning his lesson, he just became more obsessed and secretive with his devious ways. All along Union Ave, he loved chatting with those women and became a customer to many of them. He'd do it on patrol and also when he was off duty. In late January of '86, 20-year-old Janine Benattende arrived in Bakersfield from LA. And she had left the city nervously, telling her mother she just needed to get away for a few days. And on the very evening she arrived, she went to Union Ave to work, dressed up in boots and a white rabbit fur jacket, and she was never seen alive again. On February 21st, a farmer spotted something floating in the Arvin Edison Canal near Rockpile Road. It was Janine's body. She'd been shot 3 times with a .38 caliber weapon, once in the chest and twice in the back, and both rear shots entering through the same wound. Investigators found no useful physical evidence at the scene, and that case went cold. Exactly 1 year and 1 week later, on February 8th of 1987, another woman was picked up on Union Ave. And Tracy Clark was just 15 years old. She was a runaway from Seattle and had also arrived in Bakersfield the very same day she was killed. And she had checked into the El Don Motel and was working the strip when another woman on the street watched her climb into a beige Ford pickup truck with a brown camper shell. The driver was someone that woman recognized. She'd seen him many times on Union Ave, and she'd even had a paid encounter with him once. That afternoon, 2 farmers out shooting squirrels found Tracy's body in the Arvin Edison Canal, half submerged, face down, about 50 feet from a bridge. She was 3 months pregnant and had been shot multiple times. When investigators compared the bullets from Tracy's body to those recovered from Janine the previous year, well, they matched. Same .38 caliber weapon, same ammunition, the type issued to Kern County Sheriff's deputies, same canal, same stretch of road, so probably the same killer. The witness who had watched Tracy get into that truck was brought in to look at a photo lineup of 6 sheriff's deputies. Without knowing she was looking at law enforcement officers, she pointed without hesitation to David Keith Rogers. Investigators then matched the tire tracks found near the canal to the tires on his personal truck, and his shoe prints also matched those at the scene. When they arrested Rogers and questioned him, he waived his right to an attorney and just confessed to killing Tracy. He justified it in a way that he thought they'd understand, saying she'd argued with him over price and that she had insulted him. It was as if he felt she deserved it. During both investigations into the canal murders the entire time, Rogers was actively involved in the cases. He attended briefings and carried a composite sketch of the suspect in his briefcase, That composite sketch was of himself. In the end, he was convicted of first-degree murder for Tracy and second-degree murder for Janine and sentenced to death. He has remained in prison ever since and is now in his late 70s. Finding a good doctor feels like finding a diamond in the rough. And I say that from personal experience because a while back I had this nagging shoulder issue and I genuinely didn't know where to start. Like, do I just Google it and hope for the best? Well, that's where ZocDoc came in, and honestly, it made finding a good doctor super easy. ZocDoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can find someone you love. So I typed exactly what I needed, found doctors in my area, and the best part is I could read thousands of verified patient reviews from real people before I booked a single thing. That means you can actually get a feel for who this person is before you walk through their door, and when you find the right one, you book instantly. There's no phone tag or waiting on hold. Appointments typically happen within 24 to 72 hours, and sometimes same day. Over 150,000 providers across all 50 states, every specialty you can think of, in-person or video visits. It's just the smarter way to do this. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/scarymysteries to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/scarymysteries, and this message is sponsored by ZocDoc. Number 3, the Beach Club. She had a written invitation in her pocket. Her mother had been told that responsible adults would be present, and she had a curfew, home by 11. Lily was 14 years old, and that was the first teenage party she ever attended. She was excited. On November 3rd of 1989 in Stockton Beach, New South Wales, Australia, a 16-year-old boy named Jason Robertson was throwing a birthday party at the Old North Stockton Surf Club, a formerly abandoned building that the local Lions Club had taken over. Around 60 kids showed up that night, mostly sophomore students from Newcastle High. The alcohol was flowing and probably some other stuff. And the only two people over the age of 18 at the entire event were the bouncers, 18-year-old Matthew Webster and 19-year-old Guy Wilson. They were the responsible adults Lee's mother had been promised about. And what happened inside that party that night was the beginning of something horrific. Lee had been specifically targeted before she even arrived. Webster had allegedly approached someone at the party and made his intentions clear about getting Lee intoxicated. And she and a friend had been given a bottle of Jim Beam whiskey, and it was off to the races. A 15-year-old boy later told police he had gone to the beach with Lee. The witnesses said she was so intoxicated he had to almost carry her. And when Lee returned from that beach, she was bleeding, distressed, and crying. She told people at the party what had happened, that she had been attacked. But rather than help her, the party actually turned on her. Nobody seemed to care. She was just killing the vibe of the place with her sobs, and soon, groupthink took over and replaced critical thinking. And what followed from there is best described as a sustained group assault. Lee was pushed to the ground, kicked, spat on, and had beer poured over her. About 10 boys surrounded her and nobody came to help. After about 5 minutes of this, Lee managed to get up and stagger away. She threw an empty bottle at the group as she left and then disappeared into the night. Her stepfather arrived at the club around 10:50 p.m. to pick her up, but she was nowhere to be found. After briefly looking around, he assumed she had gone to a friend's place, but when she didn't come home the next morning, the search intensified. And from there, her body was found in the sand dunes not far from the surf club. She was just 14 years old. She still had her party invitation in her pocket. And the autopsy was devastating. Showed Lee had been struck with enormous force multiple times. At least 3 blows to the head. Her skull was crushed. She had been choked before she died. And the forensic evidence also indicated she had been violently SA'd. There was a blood-stained rock weighing over 12 pounds that was found beside her body. Blood spatter extended nearly 9 feet from where she lay. Now, the investigation should have been fairly straightforward. When the kids were interviewed, it would appear obvious that at least one person from that party had gone out and ended this girl's life. And sure enough, Matthew Webster confessed to killing Leigh 3 months after the fact during his third police interview. He admitted he killed her because he feared she would report everyone. And he pleaded guilty to murder in October of 1990 and was then sentenced to 20 years in prison. But he was released on parole in June of 2004 after serving 14 and a half years. But here's what made this case so deeply troubling beyond the murder itself. Webster's confession didn't match the forensic evidence in several key ways. He was never asked whether he acted alone. The extent of the girl's injuries was inconsistent with his account. The force of the blows came from multiple directions, likely suggesting multiple attackers. And despite admissions from multiple people at the party of physically assaulting the girl that night, only Wilson was ever charged with assault. And as to who violated her, well, that was never pinned on anybody, just ignored. Leigh's mother fought for years to have her case properly reinvestigated, but she eventually stopped in '97, citing exhaustion and survival. The researchers, criminologists, and writers have spent decades documenting what they believe was a catastrophic failure of justice, and that the true scale of what happened to Leigh that night on Stockton Beach was buried, minimized, and then quietly forgotten. Number 2. Daddy's Princess. She was 19 months old, blonde hair, blue eyes. She loved to dance when she heard music playing. Her mother later described walking down the street with her and watching strangers just light up when Isla smiled at them. On December 16th of 2011, Isla Reynolds was put to bed around 8 p.m. in a house on Violet Avenue in Waterville, Maine. She was wearing green polka dot pajamas with the words, "Daddy's Princess," printed across them, and a soft cast on her arm from a fracture weeks earlier that her father, Justin DiPietro, had reported as an accident. He said he tripped while carrying her and fell on top of her. Well, by the next morning, Isla was gone. Justin called 911 and told the dispatcher simply, "I woke up this morning, my daughter is not here." He told investigators she must have wandered out of the house on her own, or that someone had slipped inside during the night and taken her while 3 adults, Justin, his sister Alicia, and his girlfriend Courtney Roberts, were all present in the home, and nobody heard anything. Well, neither explanation worked well for police, and so within days the FBI was involved.
I feel like it's part of our duty to go ahead and help any way that we can.
Search teams combed the surrounding area, and what followed became the largest criminal investigation in Maine's history. 75 people searching at one point, all converging on a mid-sized Maine city, looking for a toddler who had simply ceased to exist. And then the forensics came back. Police discovered Isla's blood in multiple locations throughout the Violet Avenue home, in the basement where Justin slept, in Isla's own bedroom, on furniture, and on Isla's car seat inside Justin's truck. They also found it in his shoes. The basement smelled strongly of bleach. When the total amount was calculated, investigators confirmed it was more than a cup full of blood, far more than a small cut would ever produce. But Justin's attorney offered an explanation. That cup full of DNA evidence, well, that came from when Isla was sick and vomiting, as blood can sometimes appear in vomit. It's a shaky defense, but plausible. However, there was something else. As it turns out, shortly after Isla had been placed temporarily in his care, a placement made by a state social worker without a home visit being conducted first, Justin had taken out a life insurance policy on his 19-month-old daughter. Now, that's not something terribly uncommon, but the timing makes you wonder. In May of 2012, 5 months after Isla disappeared, Maine State Police held a press conference and made 3 things clear. First, the adults in the home were withholding information, Second, it was highly unlikely Isla would ever be found alive. And third, they believed she had been the victim of foul play inside that house at the hands of someone who knew her. But to this day, well, nobody has ever been charged.
I ask and I plead that the person or persons who have young Ayla Reynolds, that they please keep her safe.
Justin stayed publicly silent for nearly 3 weeks after Isla went missing. He attended a candlelit vigil held in her honor 1 month after she disappeared, and was the first to leave, refusing to speak to anybody. He later gave a brief interview through Waterville Police, issuing a statement saying he didn't know what had happened to her. He participated in producing awareness merchandise, and then quietly he disappeared himself, moving to California, where at one point, when someone attempted to serve him the wrongful death lawsuit, he denied being Justin DePetro altogether. Isla's mother, Trista, who had been voluntarily entering rehab for heroin addiction when Isla was placed with Justin, spent years fighting for answers. In 2017, the state of Maine officially declared Isla dead. In 2018, Trista filed the wrongful death lawsuit. In 2024, that civil case was settled, with terms kept confidential under non-disclosure agreements. The Maine State Police say the criminal investigation remains open and active, but so far, no charges have ever been filed. Number 1. One day you'll be mine. She was 23 years old, beautiful, and finally getting her life together. She had custody of her 3-year-old son, Colton. She had just signed with a modeling agency and had a job offer waiting for her in Georgia. But on September 27th of 1996, Karen Slover left her desk at the Decatur Herald and Review newspaper in Illinois, climbed into her boyfriend David Swan's black Pontiac Bonneville, and drove off to pick up her son. That was the last time she was seen alive. A few hours later, the Bonneville was found abandoned on the shoulder of westbound I-72 in central Illinois. Engine still running, the headlights were on, driver's side door hanging open, and Karen's purse still inside with everything in it. Our cops called David, who owned the vehicle, and he explained that he had let her borrow it as hers was in the shop. And as to what happened to her from there, well, he had no idea. So, what could have happened? Well, carjacking was out of the question. I mean, the car was left alone. The robbery didn't make sense either. And with all that she had going for her, Karen wouldn't just abandon her life. Not like this. The search was on to find her, and 4 days later, on October 1st, the truth about where she went was uncovered. Human remains were discovered in Lake Shelbyville, wrapped in heavy plastic bags, sealed with duct tape, and weighed down with concrete blocks. They'd been thrown off a bridge. Dental records confirmed it was Karen. She had been shot 7 times in total, all in the head, 1 in the front, 6 times in the back. The lead investigator called it overkill, a rage killing, the kind of violence that comes from someone who knew the victim.
Whoever committed this crime was a very dangerous and vicious person.
And then, after she was dead, her body had been dismembered with a power saw while still fully clothed, packed into bags and then tossed into the water. Investigators started where they always do, her boyfriend. David Swan had an imperfect alibi, and he just so happened to own a handgun matching the type used to shoot Karen. But he denied any involvement and cooperated fully and allowed searches. Eventually, he was cleared when ATM surveillance footage accounted for a 40-minute gap he'd simply forgotten about. Other former boyfriends were ruled out too. So that left the people Karen had been driving to see that evening. Her ex-husband's parents, Michael Slover Sr. and his wife Jeanette, who were babysitting Colton while Karen was at work. An agreement built into the divorce agreement itself at Jeanette's insistence. The Slovers told police Karen never arrived that evening. They said they tried to call her when she didn't show. However, phone records showed no such call was ever made. And something else had been quietly circulating. a comment that Jeanette had reportedly made to Karen's little boy more than once. According to an ex-boyfriend of Karen's who spoke to investigators, Jeanette had looked at Colton and told the toddler, "One day, you'll be all mine." Prosecutors believe the motive was custody, and Karen was planning to move to Georgia for her modeling career and intended to take Colton with her. To Michael Sr. and Jeanette, well, that was unacceptable. Their son Michael Jr. was confirmed at work the night of the murder, but his phone record showed he'd made repeated calls to his parents throughout that evening. The forensic case that cracked everything open took 2 years to build. Investigators noticed that the broken concrete used to weigh down Karen's remains looked eerily similar to concrete found at Miracle Motors, the used car lot owned by Michael Slover Sr. A forensic geologist confirmed the match. Then investigators spent 4 months on their hands and knees sifting through the dirt of that car lot. What they found was pretty interesting. A brass fastener matching Karen's Paris Club jeans, and a button matching the white shirt she'd been wearing the day she disappeared. And then came the dog hair. 6 strands of animal hair had been found on the duct tape sealing the bags. A veterinary geneticist ran DNA analysis on those strands and matched them to a black Labrador retriever. Not just any black lab, the very one that Michael Slover Sr. kept on the Miracle Motors property to guard the lot. And so in January of 2000, all 3 Slovers were arrested. In May of 2002, after a month-long trial, all 3 were convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 60 years each. Michael Sr. and Michael Jr. received an additional 5 years for concealment of a homicide. And Slover Sr., he died in prison in June of 2022. Jeanette Slover died in prison in January of 25, and Michael Slover Jr. was released in March of 2024. And so there were the darkest cases from you, the viewers. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll keep the suggestions coming. I love being able to bring you what it is exactly you guys are looking for, so just let me know. Hope you all have a great day or night out there. And watch your backs, and I'll see you over in the next one.